So this is your party, basically.
Okay.
And so we can do it your way. You can do the first interview, you can do the third interview, you can do the second go around.
Maybe I should go second. Yeah, maybe I should go second. I don't know how much time I'll have today to get through all 6, so maybe I should go second.
Go second.
Yeah.
So do you have questions about the process before we?
About the process of the interview?
Or just the method
Anything.
of wearing.
I did have one question about this, which is, so when it goes off, the beep stays on for a long time? Is that what it's meant to do? So like the beep happens and then the beep continues until I push the button again?
Yes.
Okay, and that's the way it's supposed to work?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Okay, that makes sense. All right, as long as that's the way it's supposed to work.
Do you have a question about that? Or
I think personally, like for when it's I think it makes me lose it quicker. Like if it was just one beep, I'd be able to hold on to what I was going to write down quicker. So I was wondering if like there's a way to like some setting where it could just be like one beep that was kind of quick. But if it's supposed to be long and that's the way you guys want it, that's fine. I don't know what you guys prefer, but I think I lose like the memory of what was in my mind because the beep happens and then it continues for a bit, and then the distraction of the beep after that as it continues makes me lose what I was going to write down before I get to the chance to write it down, if that makes sense.
So what I would say about that is that the fact that it's a long beep is half of a historical accident, and half a purposeful deal.
Okay.
There, in the first iteration of the beepers many years ago, the length of the beep actually got translated into how long the next interval was, in a sort of a magical kind of way that you didn't have any control over. But suffice it to say that the length of the beep was an integral part of the first beeper. But the other part about the beeper is that we have found over the years that for most people, maybe it doesn't work for you, that for most people, that if you just deliver a short beep, it's easy to ignore that. Whereas if we get you going, well, at least I got to push the button on the beeper. That, for most people, translates into, well, I'm going to go ahead and write something down about that.
Okay.
But the bottom line is that we don't have any control over it in this beeper. This beeper, it's going to beep until you push the button.
Okay, no worries. I'll get used to it eventually.
And either you will get used to it or you won't. And so we're not going to try to force you into it. It could very well be that for you, the beeper doesn't work.
Okay.
And by doesn't work, I mean it isn't an effective tool at getting it in your experience.
Got it. I do think that if it was a short beep, in my personal experience, I'd be able to remember more details by the time I get the pad out. But at the point at which I get the pad out, I think I lose more details. But I could be wrong. That's just my my personal.
And I would say let's do some interviews here and see how many details you got. And
got it.
What you do.
And then before we start, when did you wear the beeper?
I wore this yesterday, starting at around. I feel like it was around 6:30 or something like that.
So like in the evening.
Yeah, actually, I guess it probably was like before that because.
But it doesn't have to be exact. Just so that we can kind of, like if you're wearing a beeper at the same time.
Okay, got it.
Like that. So don't worry about it. All good. So at the ballpark, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So beep number one. What's in your experience of beep number one?
Okay, so at the time, I was watching a video and there was like a phrase that was. In my experience at that moment, which was, he's probably some kind of cyborg, because I was watching a video which was like a conspiracy theory about Elon Musk, and they were saying he was a cyborg. So it was that set of words was in my attention at that moment, and the feeling that it was absurd was also in my attention.
And so is he probably some kind of a cyborg? Is that a phrase that's in the video?
Yeah, that was a phrase that was spoken by the person in the video.
And are you particularly interested in attending to whatever those words? He's probably some kind of a cyborg, or is it something about that scene where those happen to be the words?
I was not particularly interested in it. I was cooking at the time, while the video was playing in the background, and I think I attended to those words just because I thought they were kind of funny. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Well, we're trying to figure out what the questions are and how to answer the questions.
Okay.
So that there's no right answer, wrong answer. The question is, what sort of grabs your experience? So our understanding of the way most people are, that might apply to you, might not, is that there's a whole lot of stuff in the universe that's going on in your environment that's going on that you could be interested in or could not be. So at this time, it sounds like you're cooking, and it could be that you're interested in cooking, and the video is just playing in the background, not paying attention at all. Or you could be cooking, and for some reason, out of the video that's playing in the background, the words come to me, and it could be about the words, or it could be about that those words seem funny, and so it could be the humorous reaction to the words, or it could be that. There was a feeling of absurdity. Is that, and is that what you meant by it's funny? Funny and
Yes.
absurd,
Yeah.
sort of the same thing.
Exactly.
And
I wrote down the feeling that it was absurd right here.
okay, and so the question that we're interested in is, caught by the leading edge of the beep, what is in your experience?
Okay. Okay, and that I feel as though I answered it as
Okay.
as it was. It was that phrase and combined with the feeling that it was absurd.
Both of them.
Yes.
And is it meant to be absurd, or is this your reaction to it? This is
It was not meant to be absurd. My feeling was that it was absurd.
Okay. And as far as your mental experience or whatever is concerned, which is more salient to you, the words or the feeling of that's absurd? Or that question might not make sense to you.
I think it was, if I had to put money on it, I'd say it was the feeling that it was absurd, but I'm not entirely sure I remember.
Okay. Now let's start with the feeling of absurd. So when you say that's funny or absurd, those are two words mean the same thing, is it?
Very similar, I guess, but absurd is closer to what it actually felt like.
And how does that present itself to you?
Okay, let me think about that. It was slight, probably slight annoyance and slight annoyance was probably the biggest part of that feeling.
And so is it more about absurdity or more about annoyance?
It's probably more about annoyance, actually.
Okay. And so there's something about what I'm hearing that's annoying, or absurdly annoying, or annoyingly absurd, something like that. Is that right?
Yes.
And so do you feel this absurdness somehow? How do you feel?
Okay. How do I feel the annoyance, or the whole thing?
And so what I'm trying to ask there is, it could be that this seems like it's a characteristic of what I hear. That what I hear is just plain absurd and annoyingly absurd. Or it could be that I feel in my body a tenseness that I recognize as being absurd. Or this thing could be entirely mental.
Yes.
I
I think there was probably some physical feeling, but I don't know. I can't remember exactly what it was.
And when you say that it's probably, what makes you think it's probably?
Because when I think about when I think about it again, and I try to remember the feeling, or just try to recreate the feeling of being slightly annoyed at something absurd. Let me try to figure out where I can place the feeling. I feel like I noticed some sort of tenseness in my stomach, maybe.
Okay. So you're raising a totally important consideration here, and I'm glad that you're doing it. So this is great. This conversation is great as far as I'm concerned. And the consideration that you're raising is, well, there's a difference between what I'm doing now, sitting at this table, and what I was doing last night at 6:35 or whatever it was, when I was standing at the counter. And what we are interested in, what this study is interested in, is what happened last night at 6:35 when the beep occurred. And so we don't want you to try to reconstruct it here.
Yes.
And then report on the reconstruction. What we want you to do is to, as best you can, freeze or take a snapshot or glom onto, or however you would conceptualize that, what happened at 6:35 right after the beep last time. Mm-hmm. And jot down some notes about that so you can tell us about that experience.
Yes. Okay.
And what I've got so far is somehow I feel an annoyance, and maybe that's bodily, maybe it's in my stomach, I'm not really sure about that. It was today when I thought about it, but that doesn't mean it was there yesterday.
Right.
And I would say we're not particularly interested in whether it's bodily or not. What we're interested in is what happens at the moment of the beep.
Okay.
And so, I guess I got a couple of more things to say about it. So one is, we don't expect you to be any good at this on the first day. Mm-hmm. And so we think it's good that you're not sure, and that you're making a distinction between what happened then and what happened now, and I'm not sure this is what it is now, what's then. That's perfect as far as we're concerned. Okay. We want you to do that, and we want you to know that we want you to do that.
Okay.
That this is a partnership that is aimed at acquiring skills of apprehending, or whatever you want to call it, what's going on at the moment of a few beeps.
Okay.
And we expect it to be we expect our interviews to be not very productive or whatever, and we're not on the first day, and then less problematic on the second day, and less problematic on the third day maybe, and that's just the way it is, and that's not a failure of yours to not have mastered the instructions, and it's not a failure of Amber for having given you crappy instructions, not a failure of mine for asking bad questions. It is the way this process works, and the alternatives are all worse. So this is a terrible process that we're going through, except by comparison to the alternatives. Okay. And the alternatives is that we would have taught you exactly what to do and exactly what to say, and then you would have done that, and we wouldn't have learned anything about what's going on in your experience.
Right. Okay.
So we understand that we're wading into shallow waters, or whatever kind of waters, and we're going to get wet doing it, and we're going to figure it out.
Okay.
So what I understand us to be saying so far is that at the moment of the beep last night, I was standing at the kitchen counter making dinner, and that was not in my experience, basically. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say that wasn't in my experience.
Was not in your experience?
No, I don't think
so. So that's like on autopilot.
That was on autopilot.
Potatoes or whatever it is that I'm doing.
Yes.
But I'm not. What has grabbed my attention out of all the possibilities? So there's the possibilities of the mashed potatoes and the peas and the corn and whatever it is that I'm making. But that doesn't get into my experience for whatever reason. What gets into my experience is something coming from the TV, the video, which is these words.
Yes.
And we've talked about the feeling, but we haven't much talked about the words. Is there anything to say about how the words are?
No, the words, they were audible. Like I was, hearing them with my ears. obviously, and it wasn't like I was reading them or anything. It was the voice, and yeah, the guy had a bit of a southern accent, so I think I was picking up on that. Just a tiny, there's a tiny bit of my awareness that was on the accent, but that's really all I can say about the words.
So would you say that you're more, as far as your attention is concerned, it's more on the content or more on the accent?
It was far more on the content.
And the content is about, he's probably some kind of a cyborg
Yes.
or whatever,
Yeah.
referring to Elon.
Yes.
And is there any way, do you have any experience of that other than I just hear with understanding? Like I got a picture of Elon or?
I don't think so. There was no picture at the time of hearing the words.
And I'm not trying to say there should be or has to be or often is or whatever. I want to make sure that we don't leave something out by mistake or whatever.
There was a sensation of this idea being a sort of wacky thing, like a whack ball thing. There was a sensation of that alongside of it, and I feel like that's what the words sort of kind of induced in me, was that sort of sensation of it being kind of crazy. But there was no picture or anything like that.
And is the being kind of crazy, is that separate from the annoyance?
I think it's separate from the annoyance, yes. I think it is part of the annoyance came slightly after. So I heard the word cyborg, which led to this is kind of crazy, and then after that the annoyance in a very short span of time.
And so we would like to be careful about the times, and if this is time marching forward, and this is the beep, and the beep continues until you push the button, and then time continues marching on like that. The moment that we're interested in is this moment right there, right? 1 microsecond we say, but it's not obviously really a microsecond. It's the last undisturbed moment just before the beep occurs. And so now, is it the case that I hear it, I think that's wacky, and I feel annoyance beep, in which case it's the annoyance that's the beep, and the hearing of it and the wackiness of it is before the beep? Or is it that time is marching on and I hear it and it's wacky and I'm annoyed, and that's all sort of caught in flight by the same thing?
Yes, that's a good. I don't know the answer to that question. I think that it basically felt like all one sort of cohesive moment. That's how I remember it.
Okay.
And that's why I wrote down that it was a whole phrase, because it felt like the whole phrase and the voice of each word was in my head at the same moment, or else I would have just written cyborg. But I wrote the whole phrase because it kind of felt like it was all there at the same time, in a sense, at the time of the beat.
And I would say that the experiential world does not conform directly to the external world.
Mm-hmm.
In the external world, the phrase, whatever that phrase was, he's probably some kind of cyborg,
Mm-hmm.
that unfolds over time. He's probably some kind
Right.
of cyborg.
Yeah.
That unfolds over time. But in the experiential world, it doesn't have to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I could, at the moment of this interruption, be just on cyborg, or it
Yes.
could be the whole thing.
Okay.
And
Mm-hmm.
either
Yeah.
way is okay. The question is, we're trying to get us to talk about
Yeah.
your experience.
And it felt like the whole thing. It didn't feel like just the word cyborg. It felt like the whole thing.
And so is that to say, I hear it, and there's something, and I recognize something wacky about it, and I'm annoyed about it, all seems sort of like one.
Yeah, it all felt like one cohesive moment. Yeah, that's what it felt. It did, yes.
And the wackiness and the annoyance are two different things within the same deal, is that right?
Yes.
And how do they present themselves in two different ways?
Okay.
And I don't know would be a perfectly good answer.
Mm.
And well, this is the first day, and I didn't know you were going to ask me those questions. Would be a perfectly
Okay.
good
Yeah.
answer too.
I don't think I know the answer to that question.
So what I would say is that the first day of this kind of is our getting to know each other. Mostly it's about our getting to know each other in the direction of how do we talk about inner experience. And we've got a lot. There's a lot that we've got to figure out here. That in one beep we've covered quite a bit of grounds. And you're learning, I imagine, what kind of questions we might ask, and we're learning what kind of questions we have to ask, and you're learning whether you can trust us, and we're learning whether we should trust you, and all those kinds of things are happening, and that's the way it is.
Mhm.
And it's a messy procedure that either we're going to get better at or we're not.
Mhm.
And I'm guessing that we will, but I'm not guaranteeing that we will.
Okay.
And I don't want us to pretend that we will.
Mhm.
It could be that we're never going to be able to get any good at this, and if on the 10th day we're still not good at it, and one of us thinks, well, we're still not very good at that, well, we should have that conversation. So
Okay.
That's always how the first day goes,
Got it.
right? Like, there's just no way that we could tell you, this is,
Mhm.
this is how you should talk about inner experience, and this is how we should ask about it.
Right.
It's just,
Yeah.
all of this is a iterative process.
Mhm. Okay, got it. That makes sense. Yeah, I don't think I can answer that question about how the two present themselves right now.
okay, fair enough.
Okay.
So I think we should go on to beep number 2, unless
Okay.
somebody's got some additional questions about this.
Okay.
And I would say again, if I haven't said it, I think you're doing a great job. This is exactly what we want to be doing.
All right, got it. Thank you.
So what, if anything, was in your experience like moment of beep 2?
Okay. So at that moment, I was playing a game of chess, and in my experience, I was imagining that my opponent's queen would capture a pawn. The experience of that was really just imagining that pawn was a queen, and by that I don't actually I wasn't imagining that the pawn looked like a queen. I was just imagining all of the squares that it would be within its reach. So I was sort of highlighting them in my own mind. So it was a visual experience.
It was a visual experience?
Yes, it was a visual experience. I was looking at the chessboard, and the squares that the pawn would have controlled if it was a queen, those squares were sort of popping out a little bit. It's not like they were actually elevated, but it was more like they had some sort of shimmer, and they were just more aware. I was more aware of them than the other ones, which were kind of a blur.
Okay. So I'd like to start with, so is this a on the computer? Is this
Yes.
a board?
It's on my phone.
Okay.
Mhm.
And when you were saying so tell me more about the queen and the pawn. Can you tell me more
Okay.
about that?
So I was sort of like, I was like calculating a line in my head of the game. So like I was saying, okay, if I was thinking if my opponent captures this pawn, what opportunities will open up, that kind of thing. And it was, so in order to do that, I had to like imagine that there was a queen on the square where the pawn was, and my pawn was gone. So that's what I was doing.
Okay. And then, okay, so then, and then you were saying that, you said you said to me about, the squares being within reach. So, could you tell me more about that?
Okay.
That part?
Right, because a pawn will control different squares than a queen controls.
Right.
So, I had to think about what squares the queen would control if it was there, because then maybe it would make a new threat, or I'd be able to do something to it. And so that's what I meant by the squares within reach. It was the squares that the queen would be able to move to if it was there.
Okay, so that's more of a description of, I guess, okay, never mind. So then about the squares having this kind of highlighty, popping out, shimmer, so what, tell me about that.
Okay. Right, so
can I ask a more basic question before we get down there?
Okay.
Is this experience primarily of seeing?
yes, it was primarily of seeing.
I'm seeing the display on my phone.
Yes. And there was something, and I was like imagining something on top of it, which was these squares. I was like, they were particularly popping out because I was thinking about them.
And what, does it look like that on the phone?
No, it does. The shimmery thing does not. It does not look like that on the phone. The shimmer was something that I was adding to it by thinking about it. So that was the like addition of my like a superimposition. It was superimposed in my visual experience. Like if you imagine like an apple on the table or something.
So I'm guessing that he hasn't answered the question that you wanted him to answer. Is that right?
I kind of backtracked around it, but did you have another question?
Well, I want to know what the answer to that question is.
Okay.
Okay.
Go
What was
ahead.
the question?
So the question that I thought she was asking, so you're looking at the phone, and we understand that the actual phone, if I were seeing the phone at the same time or whatever, doesn't shimmer.
Right. No.
The question that I thought Amber was asking was, does it look to you, as far as your experience is concerned, like the actual squares are shimmering? So does it appear that I'm looking at the phone and the phone has shimmering squares on it? Even though I know I'm making these, I'm making it. But the question is, does it experientially look like the phone is displaying shimmery squares to me?
Yes.
So the alternative is, I'm looking at the real phone, I see the real phone the way the phone is, and then I overlay shimmeriness on top of that. And so my experience is a two-way thing. I experience the phone as it is, and I experience the shimmeriness made by me. That's option 2. Option 1 is, I see just one vision, shimmery squares, as exactly like the phone was making them for me, and I...
Okay. Yeah, I would say it actually looked shimmery. It wasn't like there were two things, one the imagined phone and one the real phone. There was actual sort of shimmer to it.
Okay.
And then with that, is there, with the option 2, just to clarify, is there any, am I seeing the phone, I'm seeing the phone shimmering?
Not the whole phone, just
the squares.
just those squares.
And
yeah.
is there any awareness, as put in option 2, is there any awareness that that's not what the phone looks like?
Oh, I know that technically that shimmering is not actually there, but I don't see that it's not there. I just know logically that it's not there.
At
that
the moment of the beep?
No, that wasn't in my experience at
Oh,
the
okay.
moment. No, I wasn't thinking about the fact that the shimmering isn't actually there.
Okay.
So my experience at the moment of the beep is I'm seeing my phone present shimmery squares to me.
Yes.
I know in reality that that's not really true, and I know a lot of things that in reality that I'm not paying attention to at the moment, like there's an election going on in Georgia and a war going
Yeah.
on in Ukraine, wherever. I'm not thinking about those
Exactly.
either.
Right.
But I know them to be a fact.
Mm.
And how does shimmering or this phenomenon present itself to you?
Okay. The best way I can put it is, you know how if you took if you look at two different colored triangles or two different colored squares and you crossed your eyes, so that both would overlay on each other, and then so like let's say there's a blue one and a green one, and they're both there, and they're sort of going in and out like this because of the fact that they're overlaid on top of each other, and and your eyes are sort of focusing on one and then the other. It's like that, where there's that's what it looks like. That's the kind of shimmer I'm talking about, where there's the squares that the queen is controlling, this hypothetical queen, and those squares are sort of becoming, are these, I don't know what the other color is, but they're kind of going in and out like that. Yeah. It's kind of, okay, here's what it is. You know the magic eye illusion where you cross your eyes and then and then all of a sudden there's like an added layer of depth? Have you ever seen one of those?
Do you mean like the optical illusion of the pictures?
It is, yeah, it looks like some staticky stuff, and then you cross your eyes over it, and then all of a sudden you see something. You know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
I yeah.
I think I know what you're talking about.
That's what it's like. It's like there's that, and then that is sort of shimmering, as in there's that sort of appearing and disappearing, that added layer of depth. Okay. I feel like that really captures how it felt and how it looked.
Anything you want to
I do have some more questions about it.
say? Go for it.
So the queen can go all the way this way and all the way that way and all the way in the diagonal.
Mhm.
So does the board light up all possible ways?
It did, except for except not the entirety of the Queen's Reach was doing that. It was only like a select few. It was only like a certain radius around the Queen where I was seeing all of that happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
And were you seeing all of it, the horizontal and the vertical and the diagonal?
Yes.
And are there pieces in that range?
Yes.
The queen is the other guy's queen, I
Mhm.
understand.
Yes.
Are there your pieces in that realm?
Yes.
And does the light up go past them, or does it stop when it gets to one of your men?
It stops when it gets to one of my men.
Okay. And does the square that's lighting up, does the square that has your man on it light up like these others?
I don't know. I don't remember that.
Okay. That's a fairly fair answer.
Okay.
I think I'm good about that.
Does this depth, shimmering, whatever we're calling it, is this kind of more about the depth sort of thing of it, in the same way that the magic eye is about a depth thing, or is this like a color thing, like a color contrast thing, and maybe that question doesn't make sense, or could be something else?
I think it's more like the depth. Yeah. Yeah.
And more meaning entirely, or?
Well, It didn't actually, I don't know really how to explain it entirely, because it didn't actually look like it was deeper or higher, but it was the same feeling of contrast that you get between the deeper and higher parts when you're looking at the magic eye illusion. Where, yeah. So I'm sorry, I feel like that doesn't make sense.
No.
But I don't know how to better explain it. I do think it was the same sort of look, though.
So it's more a 3D-cality than it is a color alternation.
Yes.
And I would say, we're asking us to put into words, asking you and us to put into words, things which are not verbal.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that the words fail us is to be expected.
Okay.
And we might get better at that as we get more practice in talking about what it is we have to talk about that we may get better at that, or maybe not.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, that's part of what we're interested in finding out.
I'm good. Are you good?
I'm good.
Are you
I'm good.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
I'm good.
All right, yep, beat number 3.
Okay. This one is actually also, this is related to the same game because it happened that the beep occurred shortly after that last one. So it was also in a game. So it's a pretty similar note. So maybe not too much interesting variance here, but I was considering the possibility of giving my opponent a check with my own queen. So I was looking, I was again imagining that my queen, this time I was imagining that my queen was in a different square, and which would have given my opponent a check. And I was trying to see if there was any sort of fork or anything that I could do where after the check I would be able to capture one of his pieces. And I was looking at all of the squares that my queen would control if placed there, and it was again like they were popping out in that sort of same exact way.
And I take it, when you're saying this is similar, this is a visual experience?
Yes.
And I want to make sure that I'm understanding that correctly. When we're talking here, is this, in terms of a visual experience, is this basically the same thing as the other, where I'm seeing the shimmering on my phone
Yes.
of this?
Essentially, it's exactly the same. The only difference is that the king was in check, and that was in my mind at the time. So there was like the knowledge that if I moved there, his king would be in check, and he would have to address it. And that was in my awareness. And I would say that's really the only substantial difference between this one and the previous one, was that there was that fact in my awareness.
So could you describe this experience as if we hadn't had that first as if we hadn't talked about
Okay,
that too?
sure.
So what is it? This is a visual experience.
Yes.
What do you see?
So I was imagining that there was an empty square on the board in real life. I was imagining that square had my queen there.
And by imagining, do you mean I see my queen there?
I did not see my queen there, but I did see that square and the adjacent ones and the diagonal ones highlighted in as if kind of like in the magic eye illusion, where there's like it's all the same kind of textured stuff, but when you cross your eyes, you know that like these part of it is sort of behind and part of it is in front, even though they're not really, there's no actual depth there, but there's this feeling of visual contrast, and that sort of visual contrast was going in and out, as I was sort of allowing my awareness of the queen's reach to expand and trying to be as aware of it as possible. So those squares were becoming more and more contrasted to the rest of the board as I did that.
And by more and more contrasted, do you mean like visually more 3D-ish?
Yeah, visually more 3D-ish, and also the rest of the squares got a little bit more kind of blurrier as those ones became clearer.
Okay.
And
how about the range of the queen? Is that changing? So the diagonals go longer?
yeah,
and
as my focus got more, as I was able to like attend to it better, visualize better, the reach of the queen got a little bit bigger. I was more aware of the other square, the like further out reach of the queen.
Okay. And does this reach stop when it gets to another man? This is your queen, so if it gets to your enemy's guy, does it stop there or does it keep on going?
It stops at the man, or maybe right before the man. I'm actually still not sure about that one.
Mhm.
But, yeah.
Sorry about that.
No. Okay.
And then also the other aspect of it was the knowledge that my queen was threatening, or my queen in that position would be threatening the king. So the king would be in check and something would have to be done to alleviate the check.
And how is that knowledge present to you?
It's knowledge, it's present almost in the feeling of like, it's like a feeling of some sort of tension, not a physical tension, but there's a sensation of like, there's just a general sensation of like tension.
And so is it that in my experience at the moment of the beep, along with this the seeing of the squares and whatnot, there's some form of tension, not a physical tension, but a tension present that I know to be about the knowledge that my queen could threaten the king?
That, not that it could, but that in this position it is threatening, in this hypothetical position it is threatening the king.
And so what I'm trying to understand then is that portion there, that my queen is threatening the king,
Mm-hmm.
is that somehow directly present to me? Or what is directly present to me this tension? And
It's the
when I talk about
tension.
it now, I have to, putting into words,
Yeah.
it's about, that's what it's about, but what's present to me is this.
It's the tension. It's the tension. I wasn't thinking about it in terms of the king is in check. I was thinking about it in terms of this tension.
And tension that has no physicality or physical bodily component, I take it to be saying.
Not that I remember. Not that I remember. No.
Is this a mental tension or an
It's a
affective
it's a mental tension. It's like the feeling of conflict.
And mental meaning, again, because I could imagine it could be, I'm feeling somehow tension in my affective sense or something like that, where the tension doesn't have to be physical per se, but can somehow still present itself
Right.
with some kind of...
Yes. So let me think about it. It's like kind of suspense almost, like the feeling that something has to happen. Let me think about it. Yeah. I don't know right now how to explain that better.
That's perfectly fine.
Okay.
So can I ask a question I think that Cody asked before, but I'm not sure that I understood the question or you understood the question or I didn't
Sure.
understand the answer or whatever. So at the about the tension, do I experience this as tension or do I experience this as check?
Is that the question?
That's the question.
I experience it as tension, but it's a tension that I always I always associate it with check. Like it's almost synonymous, but it's like it's like the conceptual form of check as opposed to as opposed to the words. It's the
So that's what I'm trying to get at. I don't care about the words at all.
Okay.
The question is whether, in my experience, do I apprehend this as the manifestation of check and something needs to be done, or do I recognize this as a mental tension?
Okay. I would say as the manifestation of check and something needs to be done, but it comes with a mental tension.
So it's not primarily about just attention that I know.
Yeah, it's not primarily about just attention.
And these are very difficult distinctions to make, and we might get better at them as we go, as we figure out what kind of distinctions is going to be required for us to be able to make in order to understand your experience. We're going to have to figure out which distinctions we're going to have to make.
Okay.
A lot of other distinctions we won't have to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to have to figure out what do these guys really want.
Okay.
And that is a process that unfolds over time, and it can't be heard.
Okay.
I got one final question here. We've talked about two things kind of going on, the seeing and this tension.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else present at the moment of the beat?
No, not that I wrote down. So, no.
And are either one of these more present at the moment?
I don't think so.
So they're 50-50. If we're
I would
in the
say
ballpark
I
of
would
that,
say
then.
it was about 50-50.
okay.
So you want to do number 4?
Sure. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did. So the fourth beep, all I wrote down was that I lost it because I could just move on to the fifth one, because the fourth one, like, once I got down close to writing it down, I had become completely unconfident about what was in my attention at that moment, or in my apprehension. So I just wrote that I lost it because I was not sure at all. So would you like me to just move to 5?
Sure.
Okay. This was the last. This was the last chess one. So this was a feeling of satisfaction when I realized that I could. A lot of queens here. When I realized that I could use my knight to kick my opponent's queen out of a square that it was currently in, which would also develop my knight.
Okay, so is this more about this feeling, or is this more about the realization?
This was the feeling of satisfaction. But there was a lot less visualization in this moment. This was a feeling of satisfaction. Sorry, so many of these were about chess, by the way.
And then you said this was a lot less about visualization.
Yes.
Is it about visualization at all?
The sight of my knight, and this and like the queen, which was in the little L next to the knight, so that my knight could move to it. That was there, but that was like a very small percentage of the the thing. I had already seen that before the beep. At this point, it was just the feeling of satisfaction that I would be able to do that.
So at the moment of the beep, the feeling of satisfaction, but is the scene also there? It's just minimal, or?
It's minimal, yes. The
Okay.
visual was there, but it was minimal. And I wasn't imagining much. My knight, I had already moved my knight,
Mhm.
and I was waiting for my opponent to move the queen, so I didn't have to imagine anything. The knight was already there, the queen was already there. And the sight was in my awareness, that there was the knight and the queen, and there was an L between them, so the knight could attack the queen, or could capture the queen if the guy didn't move it.
Okay, so, just so that I understand the scene portion right, is this, I'm seeing what's on the screen presently?
Yes, that was on the
and
screen
it's-
at that moment.
And it's just minimal at this point?
It's very minimal. The rest of the board wasn't really in my awareness.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And the feeling of satisfaction was actually like the release of stress, because I was like, okay, I have a good move I can do. I don't need to worry too much about getting attacked anywhere else, because I can threaten his most valuable piece, which means he'll have to do something. So there aren't too many threats I have to worry about now. I can know that I'm safe because I can make this move. At least safe for one more move.
So that's how does satisfaction present?
Yeah, that's how the satisfaction presented. It was in the sort of release of a little bit of stress.
And then in the release of stress, it's that situation that you just described.
Mhm.
Okay, so would
It
you
was a momentary sensation of like safety.
safety? Okay. And would you say that that's? Is there anything else to say about how that is present other than that? You described why that's happening, but is there anything else to say about how that presents itself to you? This safety, this
Yes.
release of stress.
For this one, I can say that there was some bodily relaxation. So there was some sort of physical tension that was released.
And is there any part of my body that I feel that in?
I don't know what part of the
Okay.
body it was.
And so that whole thing that you were saying about about all the chess moves and like how I feel safe and all that, is that part of the experience, or is that how I can describe? Is that more context to the situation?
That was context to why I felt less stressed.
Okay.
So those exact moves were not in my experience at that moment. That was a second earlier to the beep, but that was the reason why the stress was less in that moment, and that there was that feeling of safety. That was the context for what made those feelings arise.
So I feel stress release, safety, and that's what's in my experience,
Mhm.
which is at least partially bodily.
Mhm.
And the reason for that is that these moves and that moves and I can do it and I don't, whatever. That's all explanation, not experience.
Mhm.
And so then, is this stress release safety, does that seem like all one thing? What I feel is this thing which is stress / release of tension / safety, or does it seem like those are separable?
Let me think
I
about
feel
that.
satisfaction,
Yes.
and at the same time I feel safety, and at the same time I feel.
Oh, by the way, I'm sorry. I just realized I did write down where I felt the release of stress. I felt it in my chest. I just saw that I wrote that down. I apologize. And when it comes to the two, if it was two separate feelings, let me think about that. I think it was two separate feelings. There was it was sort of a factual knowledge of safety, it wasn't a feeling of safety. It was a factual knowledge of safety because I knew that for that move, the knowledge was that I knew for that move, my position was safe. I was not in my like winning chances were not in danger in that moment. So that was a fact that was in my awareness. The sensation of stress release was a separate thing from the fact, which was experienced at least partially physically.
And in your chest.
Yes.
What does it feel like in your chest?
I think it was the release of tension. Like I think I was I had my shoulders slightly forward like this, so there was a little bit of tension here, and then I slumped backwards a little bit, so there was a release of that tension.
And experientially, does that mean like right there, or like right here, or sort of all over? Or
It was
down?
like around here.
Okay, and on the surface, or down deep, or both? Or neither?
Surface.
Okay. I think I'm good. And we're coming up on an hour. Do we want to do one more? Or?
I only have one more. So.
I feel like it's up to you since the meeting.
I'm good to go for one more.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Fine with me.
You want to do it? Go
Sure.
ahead.
Yep. So, what if anything was in your experience?
Okay.
More than beep 6.
Okay, so I was it was me whispering out loud, because I was physically whispering out loud the words, "Okay, if you say so." And I was saying it to myself.
And so, is that in your direct experience that?
That was in my direct experience, and I was sort of like, in my direct experience was saying them, and I was also imagining at the same time, and this was in my direct experience, I was imagining saying them to my girlfriend, because I was imagining having said it in a previous conversation that she and I were having. She wasn't actually there at the moment, but I was imagining in my experience saying them to her. And, but also I was standing up and looking at a shelf in real life, not in my imagination, and the shelf was very mildly in my experience. And that was just like, I was noticing sort of its like black color.
So at the moment of the beep, there's possibly maybe 3 things all simultaneously present to me?
Yeah, the whispering, the visual image of saying it to her, like her being there and saying it to her, like the image of that, and then and then the shelf. Did I already say the shelf?
Yeah.
Yeah, the shelf, her, and the whispering.
And I don't quite care about how do we numerically break it down. I just want to make sure that
Okay.
I'm hearing the sort of different things that were present there.
Okay, got it.
Is there anything specifically that's sort of more in my
The
experience?
whispering.
The whispering.
Mm-hmm. The whispering was most what was in my experience.
And how is that present to you?
Well, I was actually saying it. I was actually whispering it, so that was audibly.
So the difference here that I want to get at, because you've been saying and whispering, and also audibly, and that's an important distinction that we want to try to make. Is this, for example, mostly a saying of the words, like of speaking them and producing the words, or saying this,
Okay.
or is this mostly a hearing of it?
Okay, let me think about that. It was mostly hearing it.
So it's sort of a fact of the universe that I'm no doubt saying these words at the moment of the beat, right? Like if I was along with you, I would have heard you whisper, "Okay, if you say so," out loud.
Mm-hmm.
But what's in your experience at the moment of the beep is not saying this, but hearing it.
It's hearing it, yes.
And is the hearing of this, hearing my real self saying this out loud, or is this or not? Because I can imagine this could be I'm hearing the words in my imagination somehow, it's sort of falling out of my mouth.
Okay. It was more like hearing this hypothetical self say that, which was like the self in my imagination saying it to the girl.
And so is that to say it? So is this an imaginary or inner kind of hearing? Like it's sort of a fact universe. I'm saying this, but that
it was an external hearing, but it was like in my experience, I was imagining the words coming from myself in this hypothetical situation that I was imagining. So I was actually hearing them physically in real life, but I was imagining the source of them was not the current me, but a me from earlier that morning.
And is that part what we were talking about earlier with the imagining saying this to my girlfriend? Like is that what we were talking about, or is that a separate...
The me saying it to the girlfriend, to my girlfriend, that is the me from the morning. So that's the me, the hypothetical me that I'm imagining, because that's not who I was in that moment. That was like a me I was imagining from earlier. Sorry, that might be a little confusing the way I'm wording that.
No, that's why we have to ask these questions
Okay.
to kind of go through this.
Okay.
So I think you're doing a great job of distinguishing them.
Yeah.
Because there's
Okay.
really three me's involved.
Mm-hmm.
There's the me of the morning, there's the me at the beep, and then now there's the me here. So there's,
Okay.
Yeah.
and you're doing a good job of keeping those separate, I think.
Okay, thank you.
And so the part of this about saying this to my girlfriend, and that's where I want to try to disentangle here. How is that present to you?
That's present to me in the image of me being next to her, and the image isn't of me from the third person. It's the first person. It's first person me looking at her. So it's me looking at her as the image.
And what do you see?
I just see her sitting next to me.
Just as she had looked
Yes.
That-
Yeah.
in the morning?
Yes.
So what I've gathered so far from this is, at the moment of the beep, I am hearing a real world hearing of myself speaking, whispering out loud, okay if you say so.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow the source of that is my earlier self from that morning.
Mm-hmm.
And simultaneously that I'm seeing in my imagination from my perspective that I had that morning looking at my girlfriend.
Yes.
And is that image and the hearing, is that sort of combined? Like, are these separable sort of things? Because I know you've been treating this as separable things, but is that like I'm sort of I'm hearing a real world me saying this, but as part of like this cohesive scene, like as with this inner scene that I'm seeing?
I think so. It's almost like it's like the real world is connected is like one side of it's like of a coin, and the coin is this experience, and like there's two sides to it, which is the real world and then the imagining of the morning, and it's like they're technically two different things, but they're connected. And like the real world me is like part of this imagining of the past, of the past from the morning. Does that answer the question? Maybe.
I think so.
Okay.
So can I back this up a little bit?
Sure.
And I think, and then we'll have a conversation about why I'm backing it up. So about the imagining of this morning, can you tell me again what you see?
Yeah, okay. So I see my girlfriend sitting down. It was dim. There weren't really any lights on. It was sort of just like a bluish, grayish light over everything coming from the window. So
And do I see her from the side or from the front or the back?
I see her from the front,
Direct, straight on?
and it's a very, very blurry. It's not a very clear image. It's sort of like a humanish lump, and I know that it's her, but there aren't very many details there at all.
So it's seen,
Mhm.
this is a seen lump,
Yes.
and it's her. Can we give her a name? What can be her name?
Kylie, yeah.
Kylie.
Mhm.
So this what I see is Kylie, but the visual details of what I see is lumpy.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a very blurry, dim image.
But seen, this is not just a conceptual deal.
Yeah.
I see.
Yes. Yes, I actually do see it. It actually was in my imagination. I actually did see it.
Okay.
Mhm.
And in that seeing, I am saying, okay, if you say so.
Mhm.
And and is that experienced as part of the scene?
I'm sorry, what was the question? Is it experienced as
And-
part of the seeing?
Yeah, well, part of. So I'm recreating a scene from this morning. I understand,
Yes.
and that scene involved the words "okay," if you say so. And am I experiencing that as part of the seeing? I see the lump and the words are there. Spoken.
I don't see the words. I hear the words.
But I hear them. I hear them in the environment of
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
And am I saying those words? The imagined.
Yes, I'm saying those words.
Okay.
And it's not a different, it is me in the imagination, in the image,
Okay.
that's saying them.
Okay. And am I saying them aloud or whispering?
I'm whispering them aloud.
At the time of yesterday.
In the
morning?
image?
Yeah.
Yes. In the like imagined scene, I am whispering them out loud. And I happen to be whispering them out loud in real life as well.
Okay. And do those seem like the same thing? The whispering in the imagined scene and the whispering out loud seem like the same deal?
You know what? Actually, I think the whispering them out loud, I was not aware of whispering them out loud at the time, now that I think about it. I was only aware of whispering them in the imagined scene. It was after the beep that I realized I was actually saying them out loud in real life.
Okay.
That was not part of my awareness, which I didn't realize that until just now. So.
Okay. So now let me have the conversation that I want to have, and the reason I ask those kinds of
Okay.
questions is that what allows him to make that realization there, which is a fundamentally important realization, comes from the fact that I was forcing him or forcing us to really be concrete about the details. As long as there's room for doubt or for ambiguity about what is being said, and so I was really talking to her. I was sitting next to her. Now it turns out he's across from her. Those kinds of details. As we peel away the ambiguities about all those things, then that allows him to peel away the ambiguities about whether the out loud spoken was actually experienced. And it's almost magical. It's not at all magical, but it's almost magical in the sense that the more concrete we can be, the easier it is for him. And so if we watch the tape together, we could go back and I would point out where I was, well, that's not, we haven't been adequately concrete there, we haven't been adequately unambiguous there, we haven't been adequate, we've got to go back and erase all those ambiguities, and then life gets easier for him. And I would say I wondered at the outset whether the hearing was actually heard, whether the actual whispering was actually heard, but I didn't suspect that it wasn't. That was one of the ambiguities. Part of the ambiguities was, well, so we got two versions going on here. Are those versions side by side or parallel? Is one of them this way, one of them that way? Is he speaking aloud? No. We hadn't cleared those up. When we clear them up, I can't say it any other way except that life gets easy when you get rid of the ambiguity. Life for him as well as for us. And I would say the reason that you're here is so that we can have these kinds of conversations, because that's your role, is to provide the opportunity for us to have these kinds of conversations, because they're fundamentally important questions as far as the method of what we're doing here.
Okay.
So we appreciate your willingness.
Yeah, it's fun. I like it.
These are the kinds of conversations that are very rare, I think. Maybe non-existent outside of this room, basically, but there is, I don't know how to say it much different from what I've already said, but there's something almost magical about the details, and you wouldn't think it would matter, but it matters.
Okay.
So now we're well past
Yeah.
an hour. So we should figure out whether we're gonna do this again, which I'm in favor of doing it again.
Okay.
And we should answer any questions that you've got, that we haven't answered already, but
I think I've asked every question that I had specifically, and I would be happy to do that. Great.
and you're doing great.
Yeah.
The kinds of distinctions that you're working at making are fundamentally important kinds of things.
Okay, thank you.
And we're first days are what first days are.
Got it. All right, thank you.
All right.
Yep.
We'll see you next
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Okay, sounds great.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.